and start. Turn the recording on. Share my screen. All right, so welcome back to CS 199 EMP. So glad that we have an audience today. We're going to be covering multidimensional arrays, which is your topic for today's homework, I believe. Some stuff about strings and algorithms. I know we covered a little bit in our last session, but we'll just get more in-depth experience with it. And then functions, we're not going to have a specific section for it, but you'll be working with them throughout both of these two sections. So those are today's learning objectives. You can always follow us, follow along on the 125 website and do your coding on there. And of course, the slides are available here. Let's get into it. So multidimensional arrays. So if you've gone through today's lesson, you remember that they're just like regular arrays, but they're adding another dimension to it. You can have, I think, technically an infinite number of dimensions to an array. And in the past, we've only looked at the linear ones that look like this with just one bracket. So as you add on more dimensions, you add on more brackets, basically, and you have additional dimensions. And this is pretty much what we looked at before, like this. So this was kind of the linear one that we looked at. But you can have, you know, multi-dimensional ones that can go from here, from 2 dimensions to 3, and so on and so forth. So these are some examples that we've given here. So like if you imagine a picture, like it said in the lesson, a picture might have 3 different color channels. And so you have a 64 by 64 with 3, or a chessboard with 8 by 8 chess pieces or chars, or you might have Rubik's cubes with 6 by 3 by 3. So one-dimensional arrays as we traditionally see them like this, where they're kind of linear and stacked up like this, 1, 2, 3, like that. They're kind of limited and they're kind of useless in a sense. So we really want to be able to work with these kinds of bigger dimensions, bigger array sizes, if you want to do more things with computer science, basically. And so if you're particularly interested in machine learning and AI as a future computer science career, then this is also kind of, you're going to be seeing a lot of multidimensional data, a lot of it. Okay, so how do they work? We kind of went over that. So it's the same syntax as your usual linear array, except you got some additional brackets for each new dimension. And then inside of the brackets, you put in how many you want to have in here. So you have like 4, 3, yeah, like that. So yeah, so the other point here to remember is that they don't have to be squares, cubes, or hypercubes. So as discussed in the lecture, they don't have to be like this necessarily. 2 by 2. They can be odd numbers. They don't have to be like rectangular, I guess, or squares. They can have all these odd kind of shapes. Okay, and then of course remember that you want to figure out the array's length by doing array length. And so forth, not array dot length like this. Because this is for arrays, and this is for strings. Always remember that. Yep, and array indices start with 0, just like everything else in Java, pretty much. Okay, so we're at the first question, practice with multidimensional arrays. Are there any questions before I go over this on multidimensional arrays in general?
I think we can just go through these questions because I haven't learned this lesson. So,
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, will do. So we'll just look at the question then. So the question asks, write a function that takes in a two-dimensional int array that represents multiple sequences of integers and a target value. So we've already given you the function signature here. Okay. And basically you want to traverse through this array, this multi-dimensional array, and you need to add up the sum of those sequences and check if the sum is ever equal to the target value. And if the sum of the sequences is ever equal to the target value, you want to return true. Otherwise, you want to return false. And that's what this problem is. I'll show you guys some starter code. Trying to trying to help get you guys started here. And then you want to use array length to loop through this two-dimensional array. So here's the starter code for the multidimensional arrays problem. And we've been really nice this time, and we've given you some test cases. So this will be the two-dimensional array that you pass into the function. And this is the target value. So each of these are calls to this function. And in this case, it should print out false. In this case, it prints out true. And in this case, it prints out false. And just to give you an example of how the function should work, you want to iterate through this in two-dimensional array. So just to kind of show you, when it says two dimensions, it means like this is the first dimension here. And inside of that first dimension, you have these two arrays. And these two arrays have these two values in it. These three values here and then four values here. This is a two-dimensional array. First array has three values. The second array has four values. That doesn't necessarily have to be the case all the time. So you need to make sure that you iterate through the array using the dot length method. And as you iterate through the array, you need to keep a sum of these numbers inside of the array. So 34 plus 23 plus 53. And if that sum, after you add each value, is ever equal to the target value, you should return true. Otherwise, you should return false. So that's the gist of it. Let me know if you have questions. We'll give it 10 minutes. So we'll start back up at 6:22. Yeah, so just let me know if you have questions. Okay, it's about 6:21. I think we can go ahead and review this problem. And so it looks like you're already done. Okay. So I looked at your solution. I saw one person put their solution into the chat. And it looks pretty accurate. Except for one thing. When you ran it with this test code, were you able to get it to work? Did it print out false, true, false?
I haven't tried this stuff after I type the solution.
Okay. I will, okay, that's okay. We'll go through it together. And I think you're almost there. So the question asks you to essentially go through this array and keep a sum of the total number of integers. So we'll just call it total. Total equals 0. And then you want to loop through the first dimension in the array where int I equals 0. And then while I is then sums dot length. Okay. So now I just want to call attention to the fact that I called sums dot length here. So when I do that, what this will return is the length of this first dimension, this unknown length, okay? So if I want to know the length of any dimension after that, I need to call length a little bit differently. So you want j equals 0. J is less than sums, and here you want to know the length of the next dimension of this, whatever this first array is, basically. So that would be, and in order to do that, you want to get I. You want to do sums at I. So this will give you sums at I dot length will give you the dimension of the next array. And you will be using this similar kind of pattern to loop through all kinds of multidimensional arrays. And this is pretty similar to what your homework also do. And then you want to keep track of the total. Total is equals sums I, j. Okay, so now this will give you sums ij will go into the first. So in the first round of these for loops, it'll be I is equal to 0, and then j is equal to 0. So the first thing will come up as 34. And so total will be equal to 54. And the next round, it'll be 23, and then 53, and then 52, and 42, so on and so forth. And you'll just keep a running total of what that is when you add it back to this original total. And so the question asks you to check if the total ever equals the target value. And if it does, you should return true. But if it never ever equals the target value, you want to return false. So at the end of all the looping, you want to return false. Like so. That doesn't need the text to return. So we'll just over it. Wonderful. I think that was it. Yep, so it prints out false, true, false, which is what is expected, false, true, false. So in your code, I think you had pretty much the same thing, except in this loop here, you should loop with I like this. And
oh, I got it.
Yeah. And other than that, you have it correctly, I think, exactly pretty much what you need to do. Okay, so that was the first practice problem. So if you didn't really understand this question, that's okay. We have another practice problem, which I think is slightly easier in my opinion for multidimensional arrays, but it's up to you to judge that. So here's a second problem. It's called phone numbers. And in this problem, you create a function called phone lookup. And phone lookup takes an integer two-dimensional array called phone numbers, where the first dimension is like an indicator for the first, is like an indicator for a certain phone number, and the second dimension is all the numbers in that phone number. And then you're given another an array called target number, and this is a phone number that you want to find within the two-dimensional array. And then if the target number is within this phone number's two-dimensional array, then you want to return true, and otherwise you want to return false. So just a reminder that there will be 10, there will always be 10 numbers inside of target number and 10 numbers inside of this dimension of phone number, this dimension of phone. So that you're probably like, okay, that sounds great and all, but I have a hard time visualizing that. So if that's the case, we've provided some test cases and some starter code here for you to start with. So this is the part where you're going to be testing the code. This is the actual starter code. So what does phone numbers, that two-dimensional array, what does that look like? So in this array, there's essentially two phone numbers, two specific numbers, and each of those two numbers will have 10 things inside of it. A 10-dimensional array inside of it. Not a 10-dimensional array, but like an array with a length of 10. Yeah, that's an easier way to put it, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, so this first one will have this number and the second slot will have this number. And you basically need to find out if this target value is inside of phone numbers. So the setup should look very similar to what we just did, except instead of comparing to a single integer value, you now have to compare to this entire target number, which is another array. So we'll do 10 minutes for this one also. Come back and meet around 6:39. Let me know.
Okay.
Okay. What did you guys think? Was that a hard question to solve? Or do you need more time?
I wrote the code, but the result is false, I think.
So the first
I
one
will
should
show you.
and the second should be false.
I think the second one I print the true, but I don't know how to check the sequence of these numbers.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay. So in order to check if the sequence here and the sequence here are the same, you have to iterate through this array and also this array. And if either one of these are ever false, like if the comparison between this value and this value is ever false, you know you can break out and you don't need to check the number anymore. But I'll show you how to do it. So we got our starter code here on lookup. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a boolean called same number. We want to set that to true initially, and then we're going to go through this. You're basically going to go through the two-dimensional array. So int I 0. Wait, let me just make sure I have the indentation. Okay. Int I is equal to 0, and then I is a phone number. Dot length. Link my preference. Okay, and then you want to loop through the other part of it. Int j is 0. J is less than. So numbers dot I length j plus plus. Okay, and then you want to check if the phone numbers I, j, if that is equal to target number j, not if it's equal to, sorry, if it's not equal to, then you want to set same number equal false. Okay, so let me explain kind of what's happening here. When you're going through this array of phone numbers, so for the first slot in this phone numbers array, you're going through this array and you're checking if this number is equal to this number, and you're checking to see if this number is equal to this number. So if at any point this number is not equal to this number, then we know that they're not the same, and you can exit basically. And so this is not something you need to have. You could just do a break here, and this will exit literally. And yeah, so you don't need this, but it just makes it a little bit faster, because then you're not going to continue going down and comparing the rest of the numbers. You can just exit this loop, and then you can just check the next number. So let's say you've checked the entire number and you've gotten all the way here and all the numbers are the same, then you want to say if same number equals true. And you don't necessarily need to say equals true. You can just say if same number. That's a kind of shorthand to do it. Then you can return true. So that's just saying if the same number, if it's the same number, and if same number, this Boolean variable is still true, then we know that we never hit a point when these two numbers were not the same. So then we know that we can go ahead and return true. And then at the end, you also want to just return false, because if at any point these numbers were not equal, it's been set to false. And so you can just exit at the end that it's false. Does that make sense? I'm going to run it to return true and false here.
I'm confused about why can't the phone numbers I and J equal to target number? Why they can't just equal to and same number as true and then return false?
If you did it as true, then you could set it as true, but like this, you mean phone numbers ij equals target number, that's fine, except that you would have to set this to be true, and then this should be false in the beginning. And the idea though is that like you have to check all of these numbers, right? So and if you have to check all of the numbers, then if you set it to be true here, so let's say that 5 and this one were, these two were the same. Let's just say that this was 4 also. And then you compare these two and they're equal to each other. Okay, that's great. If they're equal to each other, let's just get rid of this border. If they're equal to each other, you're going to set them to be true, but you still want to keep checking all of these numbers. So you have to figure out how you're going to check all of the numbers, and at the end, you want to say if it's true or false. So you can set it to be true, but you just need to keep checking if it's true all the time, basically. But that's not easy to do here, though, because if you set it to be true and all of these numbers are not equal to these numbers, right? So you have to set a condition so that if phone numbers is not equal to target number, it's not equal, then you want to set same number to be false. If you set same number to equal false, you still run into the problem where if this last number was equal to this last number, so if these two numbers were equal, then it would set same number equal to be true. But these two numbers are not the same, right? This number and this number. So you can't set it to be equal to each other like this. You want to check when the numbers are not equal to each other, because if you know that one number is not equal to the target number, then you know the entire phone number is wrong. Whereas if you know that two numbers, if this number and this number are equal to each other, then you know that that's good to know, but you still have to check all of the numbers. So that doesn't really help us to check if these two are the same at this point. Does that make sense?
Wow, so complex about return true or false in this coding. I think there's so many things need to check instead of just two of them.
Yeah. You just
Oh,
have to think about it this way, though. If you were to check these two numbers, if you just check the first two numbers, that doesn't tell you enough to make a decision on whether these two numbers are the same. You have to check the whole thing first.
yes. Okay. I think we can just go through this one and I will think about this problem later.
Just think about it a little bit more. and see if you can reason why that's the case.
Okay.
Okay, so let's keep going to strings and algorithms. So we went over some of this stuff in the last video, so I won't like spend too much time on it. The important thing to remember is that strings are immutable, at least in Java they are. And it basically means that once it's created, you really can't make any changes to this, at least in the backend. It might look like you can make changes to it. You know, you can use the plus sign, you can use all sorts of different kind of functions on strings to change strings up, but really in the backend, the string is not changing. It's actually getting destroyed and then creating a new string. Yeah, so if anybody ever asks you in Java, are strings immutable, you say yes, always. And then we also talked about some different methods like split, substring, toChar array, .char add. I highly encourage you to go through the Java docs for these string functions and get familiar with them because you will be using them a lot in this class. .split, .char add, .to array. You'll see them now, you'll see them on your homeworks, you'll see them on the MP. So just get to know them, go through and like look at the string methods and understand what they do. You can always stop by office hours if you have questions on that.
Okay.
Okay, so here's the first string problem. We'll do 5 minutes for this one. Basically, it asks you to create this function called found name that takes two strings, a sentence and a name. And if the name is within the sentence, then you return true. And then if it's not, then you return false. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you can use these two methods, split and equals. Reminder that split basically takes this string and it splits it based off of the character that you pass in. And it creates a new string array, and then you can just loop through that array to figure out if this is inside of that array. It's pretty straightforward, I think. Give you guys some time to look at it. We'll regroup at 6:57. Okay, so we got about 3 minutes. Sorry that I took so long today with the questions, but yeah, let's really quickly go through this one. Founding. Did you have any trouble with this one? Was this easy or hard? What do you think?
I think this one is fun.
This one is very fun. It's easy to think about. So yeah, like I said before, you want to use the split keyword or the method, and you want to use white space as your as token. And so that will split up your sentence based off the white space. So each slot in this array will have Jackie likes sleeping in, or hey, Harsh, nice to see you. That will be what the array has. And then you want to loop through this words array. So what you can do is you can set something up like this. And you might have seen this shorthand in or for loops in the lecture. And it basically just says go through every single word inside of words, instead of writing out, with the int I equals 0, semicolon, I is less than equal to words.length I plus plus. Instead of doing all of that, you can just write it very fast and short this way. But the only disadvantage is that you can't use the indices for anything. You just you get the word, not like the index of the word. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. And then if you want to check if the word inside of, if the word is ever equals to the name, you can just set it up like this, and then you can just say if word dot equals name, then you, and if all the words don't return, if none of the words are equal to the name, then you want to return false. Oh, my bad. Should be sentence, not sentences. So that's just true, and then false is the two test cases here. And we have true and false. Great. So 7 o'clock. We had one more question for you guys to work on. I really like this question. I won't make you stick around and do it if you don't want to. But this is the last question. It's called secret code. It just takes a string array called code words and returns a string of all the first letters in code words. So if you just use .char at, then you can make this question happen. It's a fun little question. You guys can go through it on your own time. Do you want me to go through the solution for it, or do you think you're interested in just looking at the solution on the slide deck?
Okay.
You want me to go through the solution?
I think I can go it first, and if I have any questions, I can go to maybe office hours.
Okay, sounds good. Yep, the solutions are always here at the end, if you ever need to look through them. But it's really easy
Okay.
and fun question to do, so I would encourage. But that is it. We're at the end of the hour. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, you get so much out of these, like all of the questions you've done today, you'll see them on homework. They're very similar to the homework. This is good practice for the quizzes. If you didn't do too well on the quiz this week, you can always go through these slides and see if you can do them on your own without looking at anything. And then I feel like that'll prepare you really well for the quiz next week.
Okay. Oh, I have an addition question about if I want to practice more, because I think last quiz I think I didn't practice a lot, so that I failed, I think, for myself opinion. And I do you know how to find questions like our quizzes, the programming questions to do, except EMP or quiz prep?
So there's the quiz reviews. We have quiz reviews where they go back through the quiz and they show you what the questions are and they'll walk through the answers and everything. But those are not recorded, so you have to attend them live. The other thing you can do is you could go to coding practice, and then you can like, for example,
Wow.
strings, and then there are just questions here, and then you can just type.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
it's a good way to practice. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, thanks
Okay.
for coming. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, have a good day. Bye.
Bye.